Hey everyone, I'm Kat of Kat's Novel Adventures. In today's video, I want to share my TBR for the Folklore February Readathon, where I will be reading folktales, fairy tales, and fables throughout the month of February. The Folklore February Readathon is my first readathon I am hosting on my channel. I'm so excited. I can't wait. I have had so much fun looking for the folktales, fairy tales, and the fables that I plan to read. The first prompt is to read a folktale. Now keep in mind, folktales are stories that are passed down from generation to generation, mainly by telling. Folktales are stories all in their own category. However, fairy tales and fables fall under the umbrella. They are a subgenre of folktales. In addition, trickster tales, tall tales, legends, and myths are also under that umbrella of folktales. So if you want to deviate from folktales, fairy tales, and fables and choose one of those other four categories for the read a folktale prompt, go ahead. Be my guest. That's totally fine because they do fall under the umbrella of folktales. So, for my choice for Read a Folktale, I have chosen Stone Soup by Marcia Brown. This is an old one. This was published back in 1947. And it is basically about three soldiers that come marching down the road towards a French village. The peasants see them coming and suddenly become very busy, for soldiers are often hungry. So all the food was hidden under mattresses or in barns. There followed a battle of wits with the soldiers equal to the occasion. Stone soup? Why, of course, they could make a wonderful soup of stones. But of course, one must add a carrot or two, some meat, and so it went. I need to give a shout out to my friends Kathryn and Debbie, who work at Holy Ghost School. They are the librarians, and they let me raid their shelves for many of the picture books that I'm using for this readathon. The second prompt is to read a fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen. I am debating on which one I should read, whether I'm going to read one or if I'm going to go ahead and read both of them. So the first one that I'm looking at is The Snow Queen. This is by Hans Christian Andersen, and it's retold and illustrated by Richard Hess. Now, I'm not sure if you realize, but The Snow Queen is what Frozen, the Disney Frozen movie, is based on, which I just watched that for my Christmas marathon, and I thought it was fabulous. But this is what I'm planning on reading. It is indeed an amazing tale, the story of the magical adventures of two children. I guess it's Kaya and Gerda. It all begins with the shattering of a demon mirror. A splinter from it lands in Kaya's eye and holds the secret of the Snow Queen's power, enabling her to spirit Kaya away to her ice palace at the top of the world. There, deep in her thrall, he soon forgets his beloved playmate, Gerda. But Gerda does not forget. Carrying a single rosebud as a reminder of their lost happy days together, she sets out to find him. Her journey is filled with dangers and delights, with friends who help and foes who hinder her quest. So I think it's going to be a marvelous story, so I can't wait to read that one. But I also am interested in reading Thumbelina. I believe that's how you pronounce it, Thumbelina. And this is also written by Hans Christian Andersen, and it's illustrated by Lisbeth Zwerger. And it's translated from the Danish by Athea Bell. Thumbelina, I guess it's Thumbelina. I hope it's Thumbelina. I'm wondering if this is where Thumbelina comes from. Children must often contend with people and things that are so much larger or stronger than they are, and even grown-ups can feel pushed about by the giant toads and moles and June bugs of this world. It is no surprise then that the story of tiny Thumbelina has captured the imagination of readers and listeners ever since it was first published in 1835. I'm excited. I think it's going to be fun. There's some pretty illustrations in it. Look at that. The third prompt is to read a fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm. Now keep in mind, the Brothers Grimm also wrote Folktales and Fables. These are the two fairy tales that I'm planning to read. So the first one is Rapunzel. Isn't that a beautiful, beautiful cover? And this is retold by Barbara Rogoski, illustrated by Trina Shart-Hyman. And the story of Rapunzel is a husband and wife are overjoyed when they learn they are expecting a child, since they wanted a baby for a long time. But as the days pass, the wife begins to grow weak, and finally she stops eating. She yearns only for a salad made from the rampion in the witch's garden next door. Every day the wife stands on a stool to stare out of her window at the delicious-looking vegetable. But she's unable to satisfy her craving because the witch's garden is protected by a high stone wall. Alarmed by his wife's increasing frailty, the husband climbs the wall and steals some of the precious rampion. The witch discovers him and lets him escape only after he promises to give her the baby when it's born. Woohoo. That's kind of a deal I wouldn't want to make. But Rapunzel is one of my choices. And I have a collection of Grimm's fairy tales. And this book has several stories in it. This is retold by Louise Betts Egan. And they're illustrated by several different illustrators. But the stories in this book are called Grimm's Fairy Tales, and they are named after Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, two brothers from Germany who lived over 200 years ago. Their stories are about strange and fanciful things that happened once upon a time. So some of the stories in this collection are Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, Rumpelstiltskin, Snow White, the Bremen Town Musicians, Rapunzel, the Shoemaker and the Elves, the Frog Prince, the Fisherman and his Wife, and then Hansel and Gretel. I'm thinking about reading the Frog Prince. The fourth prompt is to read a fable. So I have chosen The Hare and the Tortoise by La Fontaine. It is illustrated by Brian Wildsmith, and this is a fable about a hare who's always kind of bragging about how fast he is, yada, yada, yada. And one day the tortoise decides to challenge him to a race. And the hare thinks that's hilarious, but he's going to go ahead and race him because he is so confident that he is going to win. Next book is a mood read or a mood watch. You could either read something or watch something, whatever you want to pick. I have chosen a middle grade book called Snow and Rose. This is by Emily Winfield Martin. I happened to pick this beautiful book up. It's got like a foil right here in the title. At Books A Million a couple of weeks ago, I was in there and I was like, you know, this would work out really great for my readathon. It is actually a reimagining of the classic but little known fairy tale Snow White and Rose Red, which I have never heard of that one. Snow and Rose were two sisters as different as night and day, and they lived in the woods, but it hadn't always been so. Once they lived in a big house with spectacular gardens and an army of servants. Once they had a father and mother who loved them more than the sun and the moon. But that was before their father disappeared into the woods and their mother disappeared into sorrow. This is their story and the story of the enchanted woods that have been waiting for them to break a set of terrible spells. I think it just sounds really great. So I'm excited about reading this one. I'm also wanting to read Fairytale by Stephen King. Fairytale is actually like a dark fantasy or fantasy fiction with paranormal elements, but it also has fairy tale elements or fairy tale tropes. So that is why I would also like to read this one. Hence the name Fairytale. It would work out perfectly, I think. Don't you think? The sixth prompt is to read or watch a retelling of a folktale, a fairy tale, or a fable. And I have chosen A Cajun Little Red Riding Hood by Berth Amos. And what's neat about this is it has Monsieur Cocodrie that can go walk through the pages of the book. There are little slits in the pages that you can put him in so that he can walk through. But the story is, Kathryn is the Cajun Little Red Riding Hood, and she's on her way to her grandmother Mare's house. Into the swampy woods she goes while Monsieur Cocodrie slithers through the swamp ahead of her. Kathryn is bringing Mare some pecans from a tree in her yard so that Mare can make pralines from her secret recipe. But Monsieur Cocodrie has other plans for dessert. And it also includes the recipe to make pralines. So maybe, I'm not that ambitious, but maybe, who knows? That might be kind of fun. But I think it's going to be cute. Look, it flips too. That's when Monsieur Cocodrie changes into Mare. The 7th prompt is to read a fractured fairy tale. And I'm pretty excited about this one because I think they're really funny, they're humorous. All 3 books that I'm looking at, I haven't decided which one I'm going to read yet, but I have 3 different selections I'm going to choose from. And they're all 3 are written by John Sheska. And the first one is The Frog Prince Continued. This one is illustrated. I'm trying not to get the glare in it. This one is illustrated, or the painting are by Steve Johnson. So I don't want to give anything away because they're hilarious stories, and basically they just take a fairy tale and they mix it all up. That's the whole point of a fractured fairy tale. The next one that I'm considering is The True Story of the 3 Little Pigs. Now this one is illustrated by Lane Smith. So you're going to get the true story from the wolf's point of view. And then the last one is actually a collection of fractured fairy tales. And this one is also illustrated by Lane Smith. It's The Stinky Cheese Man and Other Fairly Stupid Tales. But the stories include Chicken Lickin', The Really Ugly Duckling, The Tortoise and the Hare, but hare is spelled H-A-I-R, Cinder Rumpelstiltskin, Little Red Running Shorts, Jack's Bean Problem, and much, much more. So that's the stories that are included in here. So I don't know which one. I may read all 3 of them, but then again, I don't know. I can't decide. They're all great. I have read these in the past and I love them. The 8th prompt is to read a folktale that takes place in a country other than your own. So I have chosen The Mitten by Jan Brett. She is the author and illustrator of this fabulous book. It is a beautiful story, really sweet. And it's about a young boy named Nicky who's staying with his grandmother, Baba, and he wants to go out and play in the snow. And she lets him take his mittens, but warns him not to lose his mittens. Well, he goes out to play and, of course, loses one of his mittens. And the little animals in the woods decide that they want to try to get into the mitten. Now, what I love about Jan Brett's art and stories is that she usually has the story, the main story of what's going on in the middle, and then she has some little side pictures. And the side pictures will show you kind of like what happened prior to what's going on in the big scene, and then what may happen next. So I don't know if you can see, Nicky's right here climbing the tree and he's lost his mitten right here. And so right here is possibly the next animal that's going to appear in the story that's going to go investigate the mitten. So it's a wonderful story. I love it. It's one of my favorites, and I'm looking forward to revisiting it. The last prompt for the readathon is to watch a screen adaptation of your favorite folktale, fairy tale, or fable. I put favorite. I think watch any one that you want to. It doesn't necessarily have to be a favorite. I have decided I am going to watch Pinocchio, and I may go ahead and watch the Disney version, but I also want to watch the new one that was released just recently that was directed by Guillermo del Toro. I think that one is going to be really nice. He always does really wonderful movies, so I want to check that one out for that prompt. I wanted to share with you that in order to participate, you do not have to buy any books or any collections of stories, because you could find everything online for free if you would like. And I found 3 websites that you can go to create your whole entire TBR if you wanted to for this readathon. So let me share those websites with you. The first one is fairytales.com, the largest collection of fairy tales, folk tales, and fables online, both classic and new fairy tales. The second one is ivyjoy.com, and that's fables, fairy tales, stories, and nursery rhymes. And the last one is worldoftales.com. It has classic fairy tales by Brothers Grimm, Hans Christian Andersen, and Charles Perrault, as well as fables by Aesop and Jean de La Fontaine, and then folk tales from different parts of the world. So I will go ahead and link all of the websites below in the description in case you want to check those out. But like I said, you don't have to buy anything for this readathon, because you can literally get everything you need for all of the prompts on here. Well, that is my TBR for Folklore February. I really do appreciate you stopping by, and I hope that if you haven't decided to join the Folklore February Readathon, that you might consider joining us. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. In the meantime, stay amazing and be adventurous. And as Aesop says, adventure is worthwhile.